Grainne O'Loughlin, CEO of Karitane. Welcome to Digital Dialogue. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Adam. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting me along.
Pleasure. Let's start as a bit of background. CEO joined in 2014, I believe. Over 30 years experience in public health and community service as well, both here and in the UK. Karitane is also celebrating its centenary year this year. Big milestone, 100 years. Tell us a little bit about Karitane, yourself, and what are you doing to mark 100 years?
Yeah, well, I can say what a privilege it is to be leading Karitane through its 100 years. It has been an incredible year, actually, I guess, reflecting on how Karitane has progressed during that 100 years and all the different milestones and how much we've changed and transformed. And really, the practices, I guess, of 100 years ago in parenting support are quite different now. But what has exactly changed and why has it changed? But what's still at the heart of Karitane? So I guess what's still at the heart of Karitane is supporting parents with new babies and children in those first 2,000 days of that age range of 0 to 5. And I can tell you, you've got kids, I've got kids. Doesn't matter how amazing we are at our day jobs. When kids come along, your worlds do shift and change. And, everybody can do a little bit of guidance and support from time to time. So our job, really, our main job, is that our amazing child and family health nurses, social workers, doctors, GPs, psychiatrists, pediatricians all work together to give families the best support in those early years to get their kids off to the best start in life. So that's been our purpose, I guess, for all of these years. I guess
Well, they say it does take a village, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely right. And actually, when you look at our villages, that's a really important point because so many of our families have moved away from where they lived when they were growing up or their social supports. And some people live miles away from their families, their siblings, their parents, the grandparents, and the extended family. So your village actually changes. And when you look around your own village, wherever you might live, it might be your neighbours, your community, your school parents, your workplace. That village looks and feels quite differently. But you're quite right. The parents need that village as a form of support.
And well, you can say that by the sounds of it, Karitane has been doing a great job in sort of bringing all those networks together in one complete package. And as much as you're saying, I think there's been some changes in approaches and sort of methods to how to support families. At the heart of it, kids are still going to be kids, and as a father of three little boys, I can tell you that they do bring some challenges, some good bits, but also some hard bits too. So having a operator like Karitane that can provide that support without the judgment, I know that's always one of the issues that affects a lot of parents is the pressure that comes with judgment, and having the support network and those around that can provide an ear to listen, to understand is a great sort of a great thing to have. So congratulations, 100 years. It's a great run, and you're doing some great work. I did want to touch on workforce participation and linked into the childcare facilities in Greater Western Sydney. There's been a lot of talk over the years around childcare deserts, and I know you guys sort of provide a sort of a service beyond just childcare. But looking at that early childhood development years, what would you say is Karitane's role in providing that sort of support for working families, especially women in the region?
Yeah, and look, we ourselves, so we are employers of a 98% female workforce. So we have got two strands in that our nurses and our GPs and doctors are often female psychologists, and they also have kids. So one of our things was to make sure that we as an employer are making sure that our families have access to things like flexible work practices, and we're a breastfeeding accredited workplace. We are a family-friendly workplace accredited organisation. So we've made sure that we make it as flexible as we can for shared parenting in terms of parental leave and start times, finishing times, childcare, school attendances, drop-offs. And look, COVID probably tested the whole world to its limits in terms of people working from home and schooling from home and really having to juggle trying to work and raise your kids and look after your kids at the same time under, that real pressure cooker situation. So, so part of our work was always reaching into workplaces over the last 7 or 8 years and saying to employers and human resources departments, look, when you're transitioning families to and from work during parental leave, these are the kinds of stressors, I guess, that might be impacting them that you might consider as an employer. And one was access to childcare places. And the next was the expense of childcare. So was it worth returning to work, and what did that look like? The third thing was, could you share parental leave so it wasn't just the mothers? With lots of dads and father inclusive practice and participation now in the workplace, so that dads can actually take some parental leave and time off and share that flexible work practice. So then we looked at transition back to work so that, I don't know if you know, but 1 in 5 mums and 1 in 10 dads suffer from perinatal anxiety and depression. And that can last up to 12 months after the birth of the baby. So often as people are transitioning back to work, they might be trying to come back and really not be well. Their mental health may not be well. So how do you get employers to make sure that they're looking for any signs of challenges, I guess, in their parents coming back to work? That could be mental health. Sometimes there's child protection. There's a lot more openness around family violence and how we deal with those things in the workplace. So childcare is one thing, but then your responsibilities as an employer more holistically comes in under that family-friendly workplace, work health and safety, and looking out for your teams. So we do in-reach into a number of organisations nationally through webinars and training. So Charlene Vlahos, who's on our executive team, and we provide webinars and training for parents in the workplace so they can come together and have a lunchtime webinar and talk about some of their challenges. And also we work with a national group on family-friendly workplaces, so creating legislation and advocacy to Commonwealth and state governments around how to make an organisation a truly family-friendly place to work.
Yeah, amazing. You mentioned earlier that the first 2,000 days, it's a term that it gets used a lot. Explain to us why the first 2,000 days of a child's life are so important, and what are some of the new innovations and thinking that Karitane are leading so that families in Greater Western Sydney are supported?
Sure. So the first 2,000 days is really describing that period from antenatal during pregnancy up to a child's age 5, and that's why it's called the first 2,000 days. And the reason that it's so important is that 90% of a child's brain development actually happens during that period. So we know all that a child's physical development, social development, emotional development happens during that time. And you will hear that whatever we do in early intervention and prevention actually helps that child get the best start in life. If you can get that brain development, that hard wiring right at that stage, you're sort of setting your child's life and trajectory up for resilience and their overall health and mental health and well-being into the future. Studies and evidence abounds now, which we didn't have 100 years ago. Everyone thought they were doing good things and assumed we were doing good things, but the evidence and studies really now demonstrate that early intervention and prevention and creating that secure attachment with your children, so where they feel listened to, interact with eye contact, warm, loved, that secure attachment really makes such a big difference. And we can see in children where that hasn't been the start that they've had, that some children can go on to develop, mental health issues and schooling issues and behaviours later in life that, create some challenges for them. So that earlier the better, I guess, to create those positive experiences early in life is what the first 2,000 days is all about.
Yeah, and for those parents and with kids that probably aren't at that place now where they feel like they've got that level of resilience or comfort at the 2,000-day mark, it's not all doom and gloom post that. There's still an opportunity to sort of, work in sort of getting that development back on track.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, when we look at our service systems and how they're set up, there's many, many, many parts of the health, social services, NGO systems and early education systems that are geared towards, supporting families and young children at different milestones. I guess what we're saying is that for many, the first signs of maybe some emerging issues when a child go to school. And so you might be seeing speech delays or developmental delays or disruptive behaviours or something. And certainly there's lots of interventions that can happen when a kid starts school. But we're saying for the better outcomes, if we can identify those, issues a little bit earlier, 12 to 18 months and onwards, we've got maximum impact if we can get in the earlier, the better.
Early. Yeah.
So it's not that it's, there's lots of treatments and interventions, of course, but the earlier you get in and help support the parents as well as the child, the better the outcomes and trajectory.
Yeah. I mean, and you mentioned how much sort of, progression in terms of learning and studies that have happened in the last decade. What are some of the things that stand out to you that in terms of what we know today that we maybe didn't know a decade ago?
Yeah, look, I think the biggest thing that stands out for me is that when you look at some of the, I guess, models of care and where we've been resourcing our efforts, it's sort of been like the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. Like we still have, even if you look at closing the gap in the First Nations families and communities outcomes, or if you look at the recent ACMA study, which is the Australian Children's Maltreatment Study, we have some, shocking statistics that as a first world nation, we should, take very seriously, and we need to do a lot of work. But, when you look at child protection and child removals from families, we know we need to do better. So getting in with that earlier intervention and prevention, I guess the models we're seeing is that government is listening. So Commonwealth and state governments are now hearing the message about the first 2,000 days. It is now an appealing conversation about how do we make the education, health and social services system collaborate and partner to give better results and outcomes for our families, particularly those in, disadvantaged communities. And I guess that's new. We're looking at things like integrated child and family hubs, where instead of funding and servicing multiple providers that all do their own thing, we're actually joining up the system at a service system level. And I think that's providing holistic wraparound support, trying to minimize duplication and also fill in some gaps where there have been gaps, but using the resources and coordinating the resources better that are already in the system. So we're seeing national networks come together for service provision, and we're seeing national research collaboration, so better sharing across research partners. And I think that's the way of the future. We're also seeing philanthropy and foundations, amazing organizations like the Paul Ramsay Foundation and others really getting behind investment with governments in early intervention, prevention in disadvantaged communities. And I think that's a whole systems transformation that I haven't seen in my working career of these 30 years, which makes me feel quite excited about the work in the sector, to be honest.
Yeah. You've got locations all over Sydney. What do you see as some of the differences between the work that you're doing in Greater Western Sydney as opposed to other parts, in particular when it comes to helping out some of the more vulnerable families in the region?
Well, actually, quite interesting. We've actually got Karitane sites across 4 states and territories of Australia and regional New South Wales and Sydney and Western Sydney. So it's Southwest and Western Sydney is a very particular demographic. We actually started 100 years ago in the east of Sydney. That's where Karitane first commenced our services. And as the population and demographics started to move out west, So we realised that the services needed to follow. So we actually moved out about 1990 and mid-1990s out to southwestern Sydney to start our services. Huge diversity. Our heartland is in the middle of Fairfield. I think we've got about 52 different speaking languages in the community of Fairfield. We've got new arrivals and we've got refugees and people that really are quite isolated in their community, not just from language barriers, but may have had some trauma, depending on where they've come from, and intergenerational trauma. We've got one of the highest rates of parents who are parenting at the age of 25 or under in Campbelltown, Liverpool, Bankstown, Fairfield. So some of the highest numbers, in fact, across Australia. And we've got, as you know, we were at the forum the other week with Minister Jackson around housing issues and affordable housing and social housing. So we've got families with multiple layers of social challenges and who are parenting and often trying to find that village, Adam, to support them, and multiple languages. And I think that got really highlighted during COVID, when we had multi-faith and multicultural leaders trying to message and support the families, particularly around Fairfield where we are. And I guess we're still seeing the after effects around perinatal mental health, but also of children's development and people who were birthing alone because their families, couldn't be around them, or their grandparents couldn't come over from overseas to support them. And so quite lonely, quite isolated communities, which are still really recovering. The census data and in 2021 that's just come out will show us that, in fact, we've got young children we've got higher rates of young children under the age of 5 with 2 or more vulnerabilities on the CEFA index scales, which is a screening tool. So we can see that we've got kids there that are really in need, and families in need of support, and quite alarming pockets of family violence in the southwest Sydney as well. So child protection issues and mental health, perinatal mental health. So it's definitely a community that needs our help and support locally. And, with your work and the work of the New South Wales government and the Commonwealth government, we have managed to reach, I think we had 4,110 referrals in the last 12 months. We have reached 141,000 families, and our virtual care work has really lifted up. So during COVID, that helped, but about 50% of our interactions now with family are through digital and virtual care supports, as well as coming into those place-based services. So the reach is really growing, which is amazing.
It is, and you've certainly made your presence felt in Western Sydney, and thank you for not just the support but the services that you're providing out there. It is a fairly unique region in terms of the demographics, the people there that require support and help, and I think we're lucky to have you at the helm, leading the charge in what is 100 years. So Grainne, thank you for your time this afternoon. I appreciate your support of the dialogue and everything you're doing in Western Sydney.
And likewise, we're deeply appreciative of your help with the dialogue and Chris's help. It's been amazing to be part of that, and actually the collaborations and partnerships that have blossomed to help us do our work more collegially. So thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Grainne.
Okay, thank you.